Welcome back, Gym One Squad. We are here today again with the girls, but just want to let you know, if you are a guy watching this conversation, we're here for you too. Do not feel left out. We're holding you down too. But today we want to talk about something that God specifically put on our heart to share, and that is boundaries. So today we're going to be talking about just how to see boundaries properly, how to set boundaries properly, and honestly why they are important, and not just boundaries for other people, but boundaries for ourselves. So first, I actually want to get into the definition of a boundary. So there's two things that we found, and all credit to Mariah who found one of these, and I found another one. So boundary, by the Webster definition, means something that indicates or fixes a limit or an extent. And then the other definition of boundary, which Mariah found that I thought was interesting because it really kind of makes it introspective, is a limit of a subject or a sphere of activity. So what is a boundary? A boundary is basically you cannot get past this point. This is a point that is intentionally made and created so that danger won't be inflicted or that harm wouldn't be imposed. A boundary is not a wall to push people out or to push people away. You're not mean if you set a boundary, but a boundary is really there for protection, whether it's for you or whether it's for the other person. So with that being said, I want to ask you guys, have you ever had to set a boundary with yourself, or have you ever had to set a boundary with another person?
Yes.
The long and the short.
I think we all have. I mean, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think for me, boundaries, how do I want to put this? So I was like the boundary queen, like Oprah, like that. You get a boundary, you get a boundary.
I believe you.
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yeah. And I had to realize, I think I might be straying from your question, but I had to realize where and why I was setting boundaries. Mm-hmm. Because before, my where was, it was coming from a place of fear and coming from a place of shame. And same with my why. It was like coming from a place of fear. And I was keeping people out and I was isolating myself. And I was just being like, well, you know, you messed up. Boundary. You know what I mean? And I think that's not what boundaries are for. You know what I mean? So I've had to, but I'm relearning my boundaries and my why and my where on why I set the boundary. If that makes sense.
No, I'm really, really glad that you brought that up, because like there are certain things that, because I'm the same way. Like if you done me wrong once, I'm really not going to put myself in the position to be hurt in that way again. But what I also had to realize and recognize, though, is like you could set a boundary, but if there was no communication onto how we can fix that, then that's when it becomes more of like a wall than a boundary. Because it's like, well, I was in a relationship with somebody, they did this, they, hurt me or something went wrong. But I didn't like tell them, like, this is what you did, that was wrong, this is how it hurt me, please don't do it again. But instead of doing that, I was just like, well, I'm done. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to put myself in that position anymore. Now, if it's like a repetitive thing, you know what I mean? And like you've expressed it, you've stated it, and then they like impede upon that, then it's like, yeah, well, I'm going to, either, if you can remove yourself from that person, or if not, then it's more of like, I'm gonna put you in a different category of my life. You know what I mean? So like, it just won't be as close. It won't be what it is. Yeah. But that's important to know the difference. So I'm just really, really glad you brought that up, because, otherwise, like you said, if we're doing it out of fear, or if we're doing it from a place that's like, I just don't want to be hurt, you know what I mean? Which is real, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be hurt. That's a real, no one wants to do that. No one wants to feel that way. But you have to like express what it is that they did and give them that opportunity to change. So yeah, that's good. That's really, really good.
I'm praying on an example, but I want to bring up a point of something that you mentioned. It was like, if someone does something wrong, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I found that when I used to do that, I would run into the same experience until I actually vocalized the boundary that I needed to set.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an example, but I can't right now. But yeah, if I didn't speak up about it and actually say how I felt, then it would come up again in a different area, whether it was at work or with family. And I'm like, oh, I think I need to say something now.
Yeah.
I feel like I was like kind of the opposite in the sense where I was always like a yes person.
Yeah.
And so like I was afraid of like letting people down, or I was afraid of like hurting their feelings or whatever. And so all the time I never like set boundaries. I always like took people back, or I always just, if it was like a job and they were asking me to do like things that I shouldn't be doing, I was just like, okay, like yes, you know? And so I realized later in life that like, and with God, of course, like in order for me to have peace, I need to set boundaries in every aspect of my life, from relationships to friendships to family to workplace. Like everything needs to be a boundary in order for me to keep my peace.
Woo. Yeah. I relate to you. Cause I definitely, I didn't know about boundary. What is that? You know what I mean? So like growing up, you know, no one was teaching me about any boundaries or anything. I think so. If you were raised kind of similar to me, and I think it's probably a little bit more prevalent in like Black culture, but like if you're raised in a family that's always like, it's yes, ma'am, you know, like, thank you, please. Like, it's like there's no room for like expressing, and you know, I had fantastic parents and they're very, very loving parents, but like there's no room to like, even if you feel like based on your experience that there's like no room to like even just express like I don't want to do that, you know what I mean? And it's actually really funny because my sisters, I'm seeing now like the difference in the parenting styles, because my youngest sister who's 20 years younger than me, totally different generation, she's able to say, I don't feel like doing that. And I'm like, how could you fix your lips to say that? Like I would be dead. Not for real, I wouldn't be dead. But I almost like, I'm just so like righteously jealous of the fact that like you can, because I know that benefit is going to teach her when she's older. Like the benefit is going to be that she will be able to express when something is too much or if she's uncomfortable, because that's something that I struggle with now as an adult. And I've gotten a lot better over the years, but especially during my teenage years, I was a mess. Like people pleaser for sure, like 100%, like always was like, no, I can do it. I can do it. I could not do it. I could not do it. And so like, I think that it is so important to find your voice, like, but you also have to know what's too far for me. You know what I mean? Before you're even able to express it, you have to know that for yourself. Yeah.
And I feel like you have to embrace like the uncomfortable of that too. Like when you're so used to not setting boundaries and being like yes and yes, or people pleasing, and then when you start to do it, you start to feel like it's like really uncomfortable to say it, you know? And so and you almost feel like, well, if I say this, are they going to think that like I don't want to be their friend, or like are they not going to want to be my friend, or are they going to think I'm mean? But it's like, no, they're going to respect you. Exactly. You know? And then from that point forward, you'll live, like I said before, but like in more peace. Yeah. I mean, peace is just what I'm about, clearly. But like,
peace, gotta have it. She's fighting for that thing. Can't live without it. But no, for real. What about you guys? Like, have you guys ever had to set a boundary with another person, or like even like in your own life, or I'm not gonna do this to myself anymore, or, you know what I mean? Like, have you ever had to do that?
Yeah.
I know you have.
Yes, I have. Oh, I've done it plenty of times. Okay, so I love you, Mom. This is, we're so healthy now, and it's so crazy because this was an area that I was praying for like for a minute, because I wanted that really close relationship with my mom. And I remember during wedding planning season, it was getting really stressful, and I was asking my mom for help in specific areas, and I got the feeling she wanted it her way, and if it wasn't her way, then she would get upset about it. And I was like, okay, what we are doing in this moment is so important that I don't want to look back and be like, oh, I just did it just to make my mom happy. Yeah. And so I respectfully gave my mom an option, like, hey, in this season, I am fighting for my peace right now. And if you feel like you don't have the capacity to like, you know, kind of like stay calm when we're talking, then respectfully, I wouldn't hold it against you if you didn't help me with this planning process. Right. She was like, okay. And me and her are thriving now. We had a blast that day. And it was really tough because I think just the enemy will try to attack your mind like, no, your mom is supposed to be in every step of the way. Right. But it's like if me and my mom had a respectful understanding in that moment, like I think that is so mature and so special that I didn't even know that that was going to happen while I was praying for that type of healing with her, you know? So yeah, it was a tough boundary. But after it was like our relationship like blossomed.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's worth it.
Yeah, you have to think about the aftermath. Because, like, you know, thank you because you're just a testimony of, like, what happens when you do. Because the alternative is, like, you know, one, you know, you weren't happy with some of the outcomes, like, for your wedding, which is the most important day. And also, you know, thinking about future boundaries that you'll have to set, you know what I mean? And now you're almost kind of training yourself to be able to express that, but then also like the people that you love that are closest to you, because they don't think they're doing any harm, but you're teaching them and giving them opportunity to learn, like, you know, this is how things are going to work for us to be in a good place, because now you guys are in a good place. So that's beautiful. Yeah. All right, now what's good? What's good with you?
She's good with you.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of boundaries. Because I think I've always just been, after I started following the Lord, knowing my worth and like my self-esteem has been so solid, so that it's super easy for me to set boundaries. Because I used to not set any boundaries, and I saw what that did to me, and I'm still like working through the hurt and the pain from not even having any boundaries in any sort of sense. And so I feel like now that I'm following the Lord, I'm like, I feel like I feel it just important to the Lord to the point where it's like, I just don't want to accept anything, just anything that comes my way. And so, yeah, just like in any sense, I'm like, kind of like what you were saying, I don't want to accept anything that's going to mess up my peace because I worked way too hard to get it. Like I worked way too hard to get to the point where I am right now. And so, I think ever since I've been following the Lord, it's just been so easy to like set boundaries for me, which I feel bad saying, but it's just like, I'm just like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And like when I was working like more, I guess like the normal like 9 to 5, I'd just be like, okay, well, I'm home. I'm not going to bring work home. I'm not going to do that. Like it was just like very clear, I guess, to me, because I'm like, why would I carry that if I don't need to? Like, why would I carry that burden? Like, why would I let you mess up my peace, you know? And I think also, like, even boundaries with, like, certain things, like saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. And, like, boundaries in relationships and friendships. And, like, just, like, there'd be too much conviction afterwards of, like, why did I let that happen? Like, why did I let that person overstep? I'm like, that's not me. I'm like, I know who I am. Like, why would I, just like the conviction afterwards and the feeling afterwards, that's what keeps me from like breaking those boundaries, you know?
Yeah, that's literally what I was, as you were talking, I was like, I think that when you've had so much experience with the opposite, you're like, I cannot let that happen again. Like, there's just too much that I know and that I've learned at this point to go backwards into what, you know, was straining me or like removing my peace from me. I want to kind of get more into like boundaries with self, because I feel like sometimes those external boundaries we set are almost a little bit easier than holding yourself accountable to like your own boundaries. So, and I guess it can be like interchangeable boundaries, discipline, you know, promises to yourself, like all those kinds of things. So, and I'm gonna try to help you guys out by starting with me for an example. Okay, so let's talk about this. So Mariah knows this. I try to, after a long day at work, I've always said, I've even posted it on my social media, that you should take 10 minutes every single day to like meditate, right? Like you should try to, you know, by creating that clean break that you were just talking about, like from the 9 to 5 to going back to your work, like for me to have a clean break, I need like a 10, even if it's not 10, 5-minute like detox. So I think that one of the things that I'm recognizing about myself is that it is a lot harder for me to follow my own boundary if I don't have somebody that knows or like holding me accountable to that boundary. Like if I don't have anybody else on my side, then I am only accountable to myself. And at the end of the day, like, you know, I'm gonna give myself grace. I'm gonna be like, oh, girl, we'll do it again. We'll do it again tomorrow, you know? Or like, instead of taking 10 minutes, I'll just like turn on some TV. And then I notice, my mood is still not quite what I need it to be because I still need it to like flush everything out. But I know that I need to set some boundaries around creating more space for me in my life and in my atmosphere and in my home, like just creating more space for Ren to be in touch with Ren. But I think that, so that's an area for me. I want to hear from you guys, but I think that it helps when you have like someone who, you know, like a Mariah, who knows that like that's something that I like preach. And like I need to commit to what I say, not just because I want, you know, to not feel like a hypocrite, but because it's right, because I know that that's going to be helpful.
Yeah. And even you speaking up in that helped me learn how to transition. So when, as you were talking, I was like, internally, like, what are my own disciplines? And I was like, I tell on myself, which includes other people. But whenever I'm talking to someone, I'm like, okay, this is the area that I'm working on because other people will hold me accountable in it. And you sharing that allowed me to start putting that into practice too. So it's not only blessing you when you're sharing what you need, it's also blessing other people because they're like, oh, I'll put that in my little pocket too.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, man, that's awesome. That's what it's all about. But yeah, like what boundaries are you guys currently like setting for yourself in this season or have in the past?
I think for me, I'm in a season where like I'm not allowed to retreat. So I think it's a little different. I feel like your boundary is like, okay, retreat. But like I'm in a season where like, no, Michaela, like communicate your feelings. You know, allow people to love you. You know what I mean? Allow you to do it, even if you get it wrong. Put yourself out there. Show your real personality. You know what I mean? So I think that's, and it's weird because like that's not really a boundary, but it's a boundary for me. Like there'll be times where I feel myself retreating and it's like, no, Michaela, like, you know what I mean? Just do it or say it, you know what I mean? And I always know that even if I don't get the confirmation or the affirmation in the moment, I know I'm doing it for like future Michaela, you know what I mean? And so yeah, I think that's been really, really big in the season that I'm in.
Yeah. Sure. No, that totally is a boundary because it's like it's holding yourself to a standard and you're not allowing yourself to kind of go backwards. You know what I mean? So you're like, no, like I'm not going backwards. Like this is the line of backwards and I'm staying beyond the line of backwards. So it's totally a boundary. And I think that a lot of people can just relate to, you know, wanting to and needing to be open. You know what I mean? To be open again. Because it's scary. Like it really is scary to be like, you know, to be vulnerable and to put yourself out there, you know, not knowing the outcome. It's a huge risk. And I think that that's the only way. And I'm like, God, why'd you do it this way? Why couldn't we know everything? But like, that's the only way to progress, right? Like that's the only way is like, if you're willing to take that leap, you know what I mean? And it'll either be a hit or it'll be like a learn, you know what I mean? And then you hit the next time. It's so funny because like I've seen like my madre, she'll, with her company, with everything that she does, the coolest thing I've learned about her is she literally just throws spaghetti at the wall and sees what sticks. Like she's like, I don't know if people realize this, but like I'm just doing stuff and it sticks. Or sometimes we're like, okay, that didn't work out, but like let's learn. And that's been like the most inspiring thing for me to see because I like to know that it's about to stick. I need to know like what is, but like the only way to find out is if you do it. So I'm proud of you. That's awesome.
Super proud. Yeah. I'm over here like big cheesing as you're saying that. Because I think in the second definition, it was kind of speaking about like stopping outside forces or the outside activity of things. Yeah. Rewind. I don't know what that. But connecting it with what you were saying, it's almost like stopping the internal forces that make you want to like retreat and stop. Because setting the boundary is like, when you put it into perspective of if you're setting a boundary with someone else, it's like, okay, I'm stopping the cycle that I've allowed you to run with me, right? But you also have to set those internal boundaries, and that's what you're doing. So, great job. Yeah.
What she said.
I think for me, I'm in a very busy season of my life with just like getting married soon and just like the wedding prep that comes with it. It gets so hectic. And so I feel like with that, on top of like still like freelancing and everything, I've had to set boundaries on like my rest, if that makes sense. Because it can be so easy for me to wedding plan and then to edit a video. And then I'm like, oh, okay, like I've done my work for the day. And then I like sit in bed and then I'm like, I guess I could go on Pinterest and keep looking for wedding ideas, or I could, I should really check my statistics on my social media, and I should do this, and like, oh, I should probably do this, but I'm like supposed to be resting. Yeah. And so I feel like that, especially for me going into such a crazy season, like setting that boundary of just like, I cannot like almost like disrupt my rest, disrupt my peace. Yeah. Because I guess like I was saying earlier, because I know what happens when I do. And so I don't know, that's something I've been working through, and I need to learn how to give myself grace. Because I feel like whenever I do break that boundary, I get so mad and I get so upset. And I'm like, oh, what are you doing? And like, especially because like I'm an editor, so I'll look at screens all day, and then I'm like, you can't, you can't rest by looking at your phone. And like, I feel like I'm just so harsh on myself sometimes when I like break my boundaries. But I have to give myself grace, because I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not perfect. Right. But then also just like with how my mind works, I'm like, I'm a perfectionist. I like to work. I want to work. And so like just setting that and being like very stern and like letting people around me know like, hey, like hold me accountable. Like, after my phone call at night with my fiance, my long distance fiance, I'm like, I need to be done with my work by the time we call. And I need to do no more work, no more wedding planning. Like even in our calls, like we're not going to talk about wedding planning tonight. Like setting those boundaries. Yeah. So yeah, that's something I'm working through.
She remembers that real clear.
Yeah. It's a day by day thing for sure.
Yeah. That was really good. And I related to like a couple of the things, but I think the boundary that I'm living in right now that I set was with my job. And so my previous job that I was at for like a little over 4 years, and I was like their yes person. But I started off like as an intern, and I grew to a marketing like manager or whatever. So they knew that they could always count on me. But like when you don't set those boundaries right away, they will always see you as that way, you know? So after 4 years, they were still like expecting me to do stuff on weekends, and I would still do it because I'm also like a worker and a perfectionist and an overachiever. So then by the time I was like leaving that job, I was like so drained to the point where I was like, I don't think I'll ever go back into marketing. Like it took so much peace from me. Like it was a struggle. And then I like took a 2-month break, and then I got my new job. And literally when I got like, when they hired me, I had like a couple more questions, and I was like, what is the PTO like? Like, what are the hours? And do you guys work on weekends? Or like, do you like email past the hours and like on weekends? And she said no, and everything, and told me like what it was like. But because I asked those questions, it set a boundary with my boss. Right. And to this point, and I've been there like almost 2 years, like she has never violated it. And or sometimes she'll be like, oh, you don't have to respond now or whatever, you know? And it's not like she's trying to go above and beyond, but like I set that boundary with them. Yeah. And that I've had like I have more responsibility there, but the most peace that I've ever had at a workplace, because I'm like going there and I'm like, okay, these are my hours, and I'm not gonna like text after a certain time. I'm not gonna like work on weekends. So now I don't like bring my laptop on vacations, which I used to do and stuff like that. So that's like what I'm living in now, and it's like I'm testifying because like it really worked, and and I have peace over it, you know.
You gave me nuggets. No, seriously, you about to say something?
Well, I was gonna say, I love how you said you set them like right at the beginning, like before anything even happens. You're like, this is what I cannot do. Like you said those like so clear. And that goes for like any situation, for like relationships, for like a new job or anything. Like you need to set those right away. Because if you set them later, it's so hard to undo what's already been done. Right. So like if like you've always just been that yes person, then it's like I don't know, then you're all of a sudden like, no. It's like, that's not you. And it's like, well, no, that is me. But like, you just don't know that. Yeah. And so like, you have to set those right at the beginning, because it's so hard to undo.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes more work to undo it after you've already set a precedent than it does to actually just do it up front. And I think the cool thing that I liked is that you were very clear and specific about your boundary. Like you asked the question, and you did it in such like it was so G, because you're just asking them, do you do this? Because I don't do that. Do you do this? Okay. It wasn't like, so first off, I just want you to know, I don't do this. Yeah. I don't do that. You did it in such a professional way, but you still made it very clear and specific of what you will not do. And I'm saying, I'm taking all those nuggets because, you know, as a business person, like that's something that we have to be very, very adamant on, because it is so easy to just fall into whatever the need is. I'm gonna feel it right here and there. And it's like, yes, I can feel it, but I also want to be clear about, you know, I'm looking at things as a whole. If you want like the best version of me to come for it, then I need to rest, you know what I mean? And I need that time down. But that's so good. I also wanted to talk to y'all about this too. Like saying it, but doing it are like two practices and disciplines in itself. Because I heard somebody, I think it was like Nedra Tawwab or something. She's like, she's a speaker, she's an author, but she's big on boundaries. And she was saying like, sometimes the best way to set a boundary is to just do it. And I was like, that's interesting, because yeah, you can definitely come into a situation like saying all the right things, but until you actually do it, the behavior doesn't change, you know? So you could say, I could say, you know, I'm gonna use the work example. I could say, yeah, I'm not gonna do something past, you know, Friday at 5 p.m. Friday at 5 p.m., I'm off for the weekend. You're not gonna catch me until Monday at 9. 5:02 comes. Okay, well, there's this like last thing that I can do, and I could just do it real quick. No, you have to do it. You have to follow it up with your actions, whether it's big or small, because people will learn based off of what you do, not what you say. Yeah.
Something I was thinking about when Nay was talking, and she was saying, like, if you don't set the boundary in the beginning, it's very hard to break that cycle. So in my previous relationship, we were doing stuff that only married couples should be doing. And I decided to go celibate. And did we last? No, because I got to see real quick what he was in it for. But the biggest thing was, it was very hard to set that boundary, because for almost a year already, we were in a cycle of something that I ended up not really desiring anymore, because I started walking with God, and I was like, oh, this is a really big thing that I feel like we're using as a distraction. So putting that boundary into place was really tough, but was it worth it? Yes, because I'm married now.
That's so good.
It might take some work. It might take a lot of resistance from other people, but it's so worth it.
What would you guys say to the person who does have to do that, who has to, in the middle of them like practicing the cycle of saying yes all the time or whatever, doing something they do not want to do, like, but they have to set that boundary? Like, what would you guys say to them to encourage them?
I'd say remind yourself of your why. Like, why are you setting this boundary? Because if you start just listening to the other person as to why they don't want you to set it, it starts kind of coaxing you back into the opposite direction. So as long as you have the forefront of the why you want to do it, it makes it a little easier.
I would also say, like, don't be ashamed about it, and like, don't if they push back on that, don't like shrink back and go back on those boundaries that you set. So like, for an example, like if you're like, hey, like I want to be celibate now. And they're like, I don't know. Don't be the person that's like, oh yeah, you know, you're right. Like almost like, I guess like you said, like remember your why, but also don't be ashamed if you have to reset those boundaries. Because people change. Like the whole part of life is just, we're all in a state of change. So if you come up with new boundaries, don't be ashamed to change them. But yeah, I have more later. It was something I was just thinking about, but it doesn't. I'll ask it after. But,
okay. I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna hold you accountable. I'm gonna be like, Naomi.
Because I was gonna. Don't be ashamed.
That's good. Yeah, definitely.
I think for me, like, stand on it. You know what I mean? Like, I think people are like, oh, I'm gonna set a boundary. You know what I mean? And it's like, let's just see. Like, I'm gonna set it, and it's like light. And I think you should be gentle. But like, I think my boundaries were like, well, let me just set it and see what happens. But it's like, no, this is my boundary. Like, I know my why, I know my where, and I'm setting it. And then like, view your boundaries as like, there are gonna be people that leave and push back, but like, you're weeding out who's for you and who's not. You know what I mean? If you keep that at the forefront, and someone like does not react well to your boundary, you're like, well, I'm glad I said it. You know what I mean? Because you just saved me 6 months. You know what I mean? So like really set it and stand on it.
Yeah, that's so good. She said it's weeding out who is supposed to be there and who is not supposed to be there. Boundaries can be a tool of God to literally expose, like, okay, this is out of alignment. This is in alignment. That's out of alignment. You know what I mean? And not to be critical or like judgmental of people, but to say, this is not in alignment with where God is calling me in this season. I'm going to move you to a different category of friend or a different category of closeness and proximity. So, yeah, I just thought that was good. That's good. I want to say that.
What I'll say is kind of like to bounce off both of your guys' thoughts, which was, I love what you said about don't be afraid to change them, because I feel like boundaries, you're learning them, right? And you have to learn yourself, and you change as a person. And so like sometimes you think, oh, my boundary is just like, I won't talk to you past 12 a.m. or whatever. But then once you start doing that, you're like, wait, that's actually not working. Just kidding. It's going to have to be 10 now. So don't be afraid to change it, because you're kind of trying to see what works, you know, and how do you feel after it. And then what you said too about like standing on it is like, be in expectation of how they'll respond, the person or like wherever you're setting the boundary is. And then I remember Devon Franklin said this in his book about business. And he said something like, when you're asking for a raise, you're going to go with this number. And then like, what are you going to do if they say no? You know, and you have to be prepared to walk if like that's really what you want. And so it's like with the boundaries thing, it's like when you go set this boundary with this person, it's like, what is your response going to be if they violate that, or if they say no, or if they say they're like when you give up sex, like, so good. Sorry, I can't do that. Okay, so then what's your response going to be? Because you know that's like the commitment you made for your life. And then don't be afraid to like have to walk away from something because of that. Because anything that you walk away from, God will bring that's better and that respects you know your boundaries and where you're at.
So Chanelle. No, because like, you have to, you're aiding yourself by preparing yourself for like what that response is going to be. Because yes, you will get into some moments where you're going to set a boundary and they're going to be like, no, can't do it, won't do it. Okay, I believe you. And I've already prepared what my response is going to be. These are the consequences to you not being able to uphold the boundary, you know, and that is what it is. But giving yourself an opportunity to prepare yourself beforehand and know what you're going to say and know what your reaction is going to be. Because sometimes you're in the moment and your heart, you know what I mean? It's like, ugh, like I really, really wanted this. I really wanted it to work. But it's like, all right, that was it. They said what they needed to say. Believe them. Was that Maya Angelou? When somebody shows you who you are, believe them. But like, believe them. I got it. Okay, here's the consequence. And bounce. Just bounce. Run, even if you have to. Run if you have to. Yeah, exactly. It's a red flag. All right. So I want to help out the person. This will be the last thing. Who is, you know, hearing all that we're saying, but they've never set a boundary before. They don't even know what a boundary is until after, you know, we've been able to express it. How do you like go about setting a boundary in the best way? How do you communicate it clearly? And if you can, if the Lord places in your heart, how do you make sure to keep it? Once you've said it, once you've set the boundary, how are you prepared to keep that?
I have an example for work. So when I started, I was they're open 7 days a week. And so I would sometimes work on Sundays. Now I would ask to work the later shift, but I realized that I turn up too much in church because my church is so lit that I would be so tired when I would get into work. And I'm like, and so I set the boundary of I can't come into work on Sundays because I'm just too tired after church. And they kept scheduling me, and I was like, hey, this is for my, this is religious. Like, it's not, it's, there has to be some type of law protecting that. And they were like, no, there's not. And I was like, well, I'm going to look into it. And they're like, okay, let me know what it says. And I was like, well, okay, I'll come back. And I was praying on it. I was like, Lord, you fight my battles better than I ever could. So I eventually got the days off. But what ended up happening is we started getting more people working with us, and people started asking, oh, can you just switch your shift with me? And I had to continue setting that boundary of like, no, even though maybe I could have gone to the 9 a.m. Again, I'd be too tired. So I would just say like, no, I'm sorry. Sundays, like I just have off. So just standing firm, like you were saying, in my boundary.
Yeah.
Did that answer it?
Yeah, well, and just like how did you find yourself like able to, or how did you communicate that boundary?
Well, I also needed the backup of my husband because I was like, I'm sorry. I went to my husband and I was like, boo, how do I say this in a graceful way? And he was giving me examples because I didn't want to say it the way he was saying it.
Well, quite frankly.
Yeah. So sometimes just asking your friends or someone close to you, like, how would you say it in this instance? Because my emotions were caught in it. I was like, this is for God. Like this is where I get filled up to even be able to come here. So how dare you try to take my Sundays away? So obviously I didn't, in that moment, I needed to hear someone that was like not in the situation.
Exactly.
And it helped to get his words instead of mine.
Love a husband or a friend or whoever you've got.
Yes.
Yeah. You guys, any final thoughts about that?
We did that last time. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, just speak your heart. You'll be surprised, like, how much grace is on conversations. I feel like sometimes we're afraid to have the conversation. We're like, God, we don't know how they're gonna respond. We don't know like how they're gonna take it. But like, God's already prepared a grace for that. There's so many times where I had to like speak a boundary, and I was so scared about it. And then once I did, they were like, okay. And I'm like, oh, it was that easy?
I was tripping. Yeah.
And it's like God is already preparing the space for you, but like you have to take the step to like do it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was beautiful.
I think when it comes to like learning to set boundaries, it was hard for me to learn what my boundaries were until I started to like learn myself and like my triggers and really like my why on like how I'm feeling and like when I'm approaching a situation, learning to be like, okay, taking a step back, I'm feeling away. You know what I mean? Like, why am I feeling away? I think I need to set a boundary here. Or like, even when it comes, I've recently like been attempting to post more on like social media and stuff. And I'll post something and then I'm the archive queen. Like I'll just like, after like 10 minutes, I'm like, that's too much of my personality. You know, like they don't need to know all that. But like, I was in the process of like about to delete a video and I'm like, Michaela, why are you going to delete this? You know what I mean? Like, are you afraid that it's not going to get likes? Are you afraid that people aren't gonna like this side of you? But like taking that step and like just like taking that step back and like why, you know what I mean? So really learning yourself and your triggers and your insecurities, and then I think it'll be easier to set the healthy boundaries.
Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. I don't know. Because I'm like, I feel like I'm all over the place because I guess to know the difference between putting a boundary up or setting a boundary, but then also the difference between like putting a wall up and like completely blocking people out. And I think that was my question earlier, I guess, but I think I've been like sitting and thinking about it. But like the difference between having a wall up or keeping people away and then like a boundary, because I feel like one place comes from hurt, but then one place comes from like just being healthy and just being like, I cannot like let this happen. But I think, I don't know. I'm still trying to work it out though. I might need help. But what's the difference between like a boundary and like setting up a wall?
I think Michaela kind of said it when it was, I feel like they're both two forms of protection, but one is from fear and one is for like a healthy reason. Right?
Yeah. I think that's really important to work out. And I know I had to work that out too, especially going from unhealthy relationships to then going to a healthy relationship. Because boundaries are healthy if they're done right. And so, I don't know.
Was that what we were going to circle back to?
Yeah, that was the
okay.
question.
And so I was like, I was sitting here trying to like think it out. I'm like, and so no, that's a great point. It comes from fear. So I had my question answered.
Amen. Praise the Lord.
Amen.
She will sleep well tonight.
Yeah, I
will. Well, family, if this has helped you guys the way that it has helped us, because I've got so many goodies to put in my goodie bag, comment below how it's helped you. And also, we're going to be your accountability partners. Let us know what boundary you are going to set or what boundary you currently have in place that you are going to continue to walk out in faith. We'll be praying for you. You'll be watching. Also, check out the link below in the description because you will find our links to our Discord channel where we can talk about things even more and all other ways that you can get plugged into Generation 1. With all that being said, we love you guys and we will see you next week. And remember to keep those boundaries solid.
That's right.
Peace.